Finally, we are doing the phrasal verbs, which is part of the ISC English language for both class 11 and class 12. And we'll be going through it in alphabetical order because that would make it much easier to actually understand how the different phrasal verbs are used. But before I start, I want to define what exactly is a phrasal verb. It's not a very complicated definition. It's basically the combination of a verb along with a preposition. And when the same verb, for instance, attend here, is used with different prepositions, it gives a different meaning in the entire sentence. And that's what is the beauty of phrasal verbs. And you are tested on phrasal verbs, on how to use phrasal verbs in your examination. So many marks in that examination paper really depend on how well you do the phrasal verbs. Okay, now I was see, if you are the kind of person who is not used to reading newspapers regularly or do not have the reading habit of reading either novels, fiction or non-fiction, some of this you may find it a little difficult. Also, if you are used to understanding chapters in a vernacular language, again this could be a little complicated, and for this the only solution is to actually practice this a lot. Okay, so that is my simple mantra in order to ensure that you don't lose marks when it comes to phrasal verbs. Now, I was looking at this book, Total English, which is a highly recommended book, and it's a pretty good book. But when it came to phrasal verbs, I realized that it was not a very comprehensive list that they had made, because many of the phrasal verbs, they had just put only one option, whereas actually in many cases, like for instance, you see here, bring out, up, in, forth, about, there are at least 5 different prepositions that can be used with a verb like bring, each one of them having a different meaning. So I'm not going to be following this particular book. This is my list, and it's going to be an extremely comprehensive list so that nothing is left out and you know exactly what is to be used with what depending on the nature of the sentence. So those fill in the blanks, you should be getting it right. Okay, so let's start with A. We'll be doing A and B in this particular video. The first one is act on. Okay, now act on can also be act on or act upon. So he acted upon my advice. He acted upon my advice, or the government did not act on the advice given by the President of India. That is, the President of India gives some advice, but the government did not act on the advice. So it could be on, upon, both are perfectly all right. So remember this. Now we come to attend, and there are these 2 different prepositions that can be used with attend. Attend to, when you say attend to, it essentially means to manage something. I want you to attend to this task immediately, right now. So you attend to that task. You attend upon, now that's a slightly different kind of a meaning. It means to take care. Okay, a slight subtle shift in meaning, as it were. There was only one caretaker to attend upon the many senior citizens in that old age home. So you attend upon in the sense that you take care of somebody. Okay, but attend to means almost like in a more of a managerial kind of a role. Assure of, right? The bank manager assured me of help. Okay, so when there is an assurance given that it will be taken care of. So with assure, you go with the preposition of. Apologize to. He apologized to his parents for his misconduct or for his behavior. So you apologize to. Okay, that's the preposition which normally would come along with apologize. Now we come to agree to, agree with, agree upon, agree in. And what is the difference between these 4? Now, the first one, agree to. His father did not agree to the idea of a big birthday party. He did not agree. He was not in agreement with the son's idea that he wanted to host a big birthday party. So in that case, it will be when the father is not agreeing to, it will be to, which will be used here. With. Now, many people actually will get confused between to and with in the sentence that I just mentioned, right? the parent agreed with the assessment of the child by the teacher. You go for the parent teachers meeting, the teacher gives a particular opinion about the child and the parent says, I agree with your opinion. Your assessment, I agree with. So in that sense, it's an agree with. You need to be a little careful when it comes to agree to and agree with. Okay, so my boss has not agreed to. It's almost like see, agree to is almost when you are it's a sense of permission, it's a sense of a slightly superiority kind of a role, which is why a boss or a parent. But when you are saying I am not in agreement with you, so we are almost like equal. I am not in agreement to you will be incorrect, right? So I am not in agreement with you, right? So just remember of in terms of the rank, agree to is more or less slightly unequal kind of a rank of people that we are talking about. The third one is agree upon. The two thieves agreed upon the plan to rob the bank. They kind of agreed upon that, okay, together we will go and rob the bank. Okay, so they kind of hatched the plan together. Okay, they agreed on the plan. Okay, the fourth one is agree in. Now agree in is not something which is used very frequently, but you can say they agreed in principle to the draft plan. That, okay, to the India Independence Act which was framed, the Congress and the Muslim League agreed in principle to the draft plan. Okay, so that in that case it will be agree in. So this one is very important. Please remember the four different ways it is used. Apply to and apply for. Again, this is important. Now I applied to the bank for a loan. You apply to the bank for a loan. Okay, now apply for, he applied for a job at the bank. So when you are applying for a job, it will be for. Okay, but when you are kind of seeking something from somebody, the preposition here is used is to. Okay, so apply to somebody, I applied to the principal for leave. I applied for the post of a teacher at the school. You understand the difference? So depending essentially on what is the subject in that sentence, you need to read the sentence and then accordingly see which ones actually fit the bill, and that will come only with more practice, and as I always say, with more reading. Just make it a habit to read a newspaper, even if that's for just 20 minutes in a 24-hour cycle. It will really help you, because all that will keep going into your head, because obviously when sentences, big paragraphs are written, obviously a lot of phrasal verbs are used. Okay, then we come to anxious about. He's anxious about his film release. Shah Rukh Khan is anxious about his film release. Okay, so anxious about. Next we come to appeal against and appeal to. Now this one is important. Agree is important, apply is important, appeal. Whichever have more than one option, please take special care of them. Appeal against and appeal to. They appealed against the judgment in the Supreme Court. You get an adverse judgment in the High Court, you go and appeal to the Supreme Court, right? So you appeal against the judgment. You appeal to the Supreme Court, but you appeal against the judgment. You understand the difference? You are going against, because you are not happy with the judgment that you have got in the High Court. So you are appealing against the judgment in the Supreme Court, right? We appealed to the government for help, right? We appealed to the, whenever you are kind of appealing with respect to a higher superior authority, it will be to. You appeal, you make an appeal to the government, you make an appeal to the Chief Justice for help, right? So that is appeal. This one is also important. Appoint to, appoint for, and appointment with. Okay, now he was appointed to the post of general manager in the company. He was appointed to the post. He was appointed for a period of 5 years. You understand? He was appointed to the post of a general manager in the bank for a period of, he was appointed for a period of 5 years. So you need to understand one is to and one is for. Appointment, when it comes to appointment, it will be with. in the sense that I have an appointment this evening with the doctor. I have an appointment with the doctor this evening. So then it will be with when it comes to appointment. Okay, so please remember the distinction out here. Now we come to ashamed. Now when it comes to ashamed, you should be ashamed of yourself. Okay, you should be ashamed of yourself. Aware, pretty much the same thing. Are you aware of the theft in your neighborhood? You're asking a question. Are you aware? आपको मालूम है क्या कि आपके पड़ोस में चोरी हो गई थी? Are you aware of the theft in the neighborhood? Translating from Hindi to English will never work because Hindi does not have the same kind of system of phrasal verbs. Okay, so that's a mistake many students make and make mistakes in their phrasal verbs. Don't do that. The third is avail of, right? I availed of my leave before the end of the year, before the end of the financial year, before the end of the calendar year. I availed of my leave. Authority on. He's an authority on William Shakespeare, that he knows William Shakespeare so well. So he's an authority on this subject. He's an authority on this subject. Please remember this one. Do not make a mistake with authority on. Argue over and argue with. This is another one which is frequently asked. The two friends had an argument over money. You know, पैसे के ऊपर they had an argument over money. Okay. The patient argued with the doctor. The patient argued with the nurse or with the doctor. So you could make it like this. The patient argued with the doctor. The patient argued with the doctor over the nature of treatment. Remember, when you're talking about a subject which is given, that on which the argument may have taken place, then you will have the over. But with the person who are you arguing with, then you come to with. Okay. Approve of. I do not approve of your behavior. Okay. I do not approve of your behavior. You cannot use with your behavior or against your behavior, right? So you will say, I do not approve of your behavior. Please write down this entire list with the sentences so that it's very clear in your head as to where what goes. Okay. Arrive at, in, with. Again, another one which is important. And I'll give you very similar examples for you to understand. He arrived at the auditorium in a fancy car. The hero arrived at the auditorium in a fancy car. Okay? At. He arrived in style in a fancy car. He arrived in style in a fancy car. He arrived at the auditorium in a fancy car. He arrived in style in a fancy car. He arrived with his heroine. The hero arrived with his heroine. So the word arrived being used with three different objects with three different kinds of prepositions, each one of them giving a slightly different meaning, each one of them talking about the same event but giving a slightly different meaning. So you need to be very conscious about where you are using what. The final one as far as A is concerned is associate with. My father is associated with the company as a consultant. Associate with. I am associated with that particular project as an engineer. I am associated with that film as an assistant director, right? So you associate with somebody. Okay, so that's as far as A is concerned. I hope this one is clear. Now let's come to B. Begin at and begin with. Begin at, what you normally say, this video begins at 2 minutes 35 seconds, right? So that will be at, at the point where something is starting, beginning. Begin with. We would begin the school proceedings with the national anthem. We would begin with the national anthem at the school every day, right? So it will be begin with when you are starting something, right? So there is a very subtle difference. Please note the subtle difference. See, it's very difficult to formulate rules, etc., and make you remember by rules. But when you keep listening to these kind of phrases and understand what goes with this thing, we begin with the national anthem every day in the school assembly. And when you're talking about the school assembly would begin at 8 a.m. Okay, so that's how you need to understand your mind depending on the nature of the sentence. Born to and born of. Okay, this one is important and both are okay. Both are okay, though born to generally ends up sounding better and more correct to the ear. He was born to very illustrious parents, or he was born to very famous parents. Okay, he was born to very famous parents. He was born of very famous parents is also okay, though I personally prefer to over of. Okay, now bring. Now this one is important. Bring out, bring up, bring in, bring forth, bring about. Okay, now how are these 5 different prepositions different? How do they lend a different meaning to the sentence? Now bring out, we bring out the magazine with limited manpower, right? Basically to say that we managed to publish the magazine but we have very limited manpower. So we bring out, when you bring out a newspaper, bring out a magazine, bring out the bulletin with very little, so it will be out. Okay, but out can also have slightly different meaning. I expected you to bring out the details which are not in the public domain. So it also means in some way of a revelation, किसी चीज का खुलासा करना. So in that sense also bring out, to reveal something, also it can be used. Bring up is to kind of raise someone. Okay, so the aunt brought up her nephew after his parents had passed away. So you are bringing up as in you are raising that child. He brought up that sensitive topic, as in to broach that sensitive topic, that is people are not very comfortable talking about it, but he broached the subject. He broached the subject, he brought up the subject, also can be used with up. So up can be used in both senses. Bring in. How much will the sale of this house bring in? Okay, you want to know how much money will come in as a result of the sale of this property. Okay, in that case, and bring in to you, then you are kind of bring in. Bring forth. Again, something which is not very normally used. It's basically to mean to introduce. I'm new to the job, but I can bring forth many investments. I'm new to the job, but I can bring forth many investments. But here also, maybe in would be appropriate as well. I can bring in many investments. I can bring in many new investors, right? So forth is not something which is very usually used. Bring about. He brought about the family's ruin. Okay, he brought about the family's ruin, that because of him, the entire family name and honor was completely destroyed, completely ruined. Bent on, bent upon. Both can be used. He was bent upon finishing the homework as soon as he returned from school, like many good children do. That he was bent upon or bent on finishing his homework the moment he returned from school. Beg for. He begged for mercy, right? He begged for mercy. He wanted to be forgiven. So he begged for mercy. Back out, back up. This one is important. Now back out is, she backed out of the marriage at the last minute. She didn't like the bridegroom. She backed out of the marriage at the last minute. Back up. He was backed up by his supporters. You say, no, you have my back. Similarly, he was backed up by his supporters. That is, they kind of lent him moral support, emotional support. Okay. Or you could say it can be used in a different sense. He's a good backup for the boss. In this sense, back is more like a noun rather than a verb. He's a good backup for his boss. Okay, so something which essentially conveys support. This one is important. Break up, break into, break out, break with, break down. Anything which has more than 2 or 3 is always very important. Break up. The two lovers broke up because of differences, due to differences. They broke up. Simple. Okay, I think most of you will understand this. Break into. The thief broke into the house. The thief broke into the house to commit a theft. Break out. Again, this is important. Dengue breaks out in many cities during the monsoon season, right? So dengue broke out, malaria broke out, cholera broke out. Okay, COVID has broken out in the entire world in 2020. So break out is something important out here. Break with. Now, break with in a different sense. During Ramzan, Muslims break their fast with dates. Okay, break with. Okay, so that can be used in a specific tense sense like this. Break down. She broke down when she heard the tragic news. She broke down when she heard the tragic news. So break, different versions. Please remember, up, into, out and down are more important than with, but you should know the different nuances, different ways in which the same verb can be used with different prepositions. Believe in. He believed in his master. He believed in his master, saying, I trusted you, I trust you. So he believes in his master. Blind to. Now here many students actually go wrong. Do not be blind to his faults. Basically to say that do not ignore, don't think that he does not have any faults. Do not ignore the faults that he has in his personality. So don't be blind to his faults. So blind in that case is followed by the preposition to. Okay, so those are the phrasal verbs of A and B which I have done. This is going to be a long series. I don't know how many episodes we will make, but we intend to kind of cover it so that we do it in a very comprehensive manner. Please write in with your feedback if you want any more kind of changes in the way this is being taught. But yes, as I said right at the beginning, practice, practice and practice. That's the only way you will actually get better at it and ensure that you don't make silly mistakes and lose marks unnecessarily in the examination. Thank you very much for watching.